Hey all, today we have an amazing guest, Mr. Brady Brim-DeForest, to talk about AI and how to navigate the future towards AI, which connects so much back to his new book he's just released, Smaller is Better, which is a lot about how do you sustain and create organizational agility. Really great show, some great concepts in here and great knowledge. We've put up on the Enterprise Excellence Academy or podcast website a download which you can get hold of on Agile Scrum at Scale framework. It's a simple work instruction or infographic that allows you to understand the concept that Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber have developed on how to create an agile organization at scale. We feel this work instruction is really pertinent to this episode, and for those that want to go deep into the systems of scaling, definitely get hold of Brady's book, and also you can have a look at this work instruction to help. It's under resources on the Enterprise Excellence podcast website. Let's get to the show.
Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence podcast, where we aim to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve and create enduring, high-performance, low-impact enterprises. Learn how to enhance morale, customer and purpose centricity, focus, and calmness. Learn how to create and sustain a culture of excellence at all levels of your organization.
Welcome to episode 178 of the Enterprise Excellence podcast. It is such a pleasure to have Mr. Brady Brim De-Forest on the show with us today. Brady is the author of the book, Smaller is Better, using small autonomous teams to drive the future of enterprises. He's the CEO of Formula.monks, who help organizations transform their businesses with AI. Today, we're discussing how to transform the enterprise into a lean, mean, fighting machine that can compete against the coming wave of AI disruption. Let's get into the episode. Brady, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Brad. Really a pleasure to be here.
Oh, ditto, mate. So looking forward to the conversation and really love the work you've done, mate. I want to first of all touch on this book, mate, because I know books are a labor of love and a lot of hard work. And before we jump to AI, I just want to ask you, mate, you've written this book, Smaller is Better. Why did you write it now?
A great question. There's two parts to that answer. One is I started writing it about almost 4 years ago, and it took forever to finish because I'm not the world's most proficient writer. It turns out when I sat down to begin, I thought, this will be easy. I'll block out 2 or 3 hours a couple times a week, and I'll just pound the book out. Turns out that every time I sat down, tried to do it, a million things got in the way. Yep. As a leader in an organization, a lot of my day is interrupt driven.
Yeah.
Helping to put out fires, talking people off the edge, cleaning up messes. And that isn't really great for flow state. I think along the way, I also realized that maybe my brain had been rewired because of my work. And whereas I used to be a momentum-based worker and getting into flow state was achievable, now everything is done in 15-minute increments. So over the course of about 6 months, I experimented with different ways of writing the book and finally settled on 15-minute increments 3 times a day. That unfortunately takes a long time to if you're only spending 15 minutes a day, 3 times a day, you don't have a lot of writing time. So it took about 3 years to finish it. But to your original question, Brad, for me, it was a way of creating an opportunity for exponential scale. And as a consulting organization, there is a linear connection between the work that we do and the impact that we have on the volume of clients in our portfolio at any given time. And I think as an ambitious organization filled with ambitious creators, builders, makers, consultants, strategists, having exponential impact, being able to really shape the world around you is an important part of waking up every day and doing the kind of challenging work that we do. So the book was, in my mind, a way to have an outsized impact. We didn't have to hoard the knowledge, the methodologies, the processes. If we put them down on paper, then we could make our knowledge, our approach accessible to anyone. And really two reasons for that. One is it makes it easier for us to work with those organizations if they actually begin to adopt our way of working before we connect with them. And two, it's also the best way to improve the work that you do. If writing it down is tremendously helpful in the first place. It's been useful for me to have a roadmap in my own mind of the things I know. And I actually are now able to refer back to the book in ways that make the ideas, the concepts a lot more approachable, because I had to really work when writing them down to make them digestible without the benefit of the context that comes from a conversation and a relationship that you develop with someone on the other side. And then two, I think it's also been an incredibly amazing way to improve our way of thinking, because the amount of feedback, the book came out less than a month ago, only a few weeks ago, and it has already generated such an incredible amount of dialogue, both internally and externally, that helps to stress test these principles, practices with a much broader surface area of organizations and the professionals in them. I would at this point recommend everyone should write a book. if part of your job function or your organization's purpose or mission is requires the application of knowledge, then writing a book is a phenomenal way to actually improve your own approach.
Yeah, I'll vouch for that, Brady. Like, I love that comment you made that it helps you distill your thinking and really lay it down in a concise, easy way. Because there's no more important way when we try to write it in a book than you've got to make it simple and straightforward, and it condenses your thinking. It's a credit to you, mate, for putting in that effort and creating this book. Do you mind, before we go into the AI piece, just like a 2-minute overview, mate? The key concepts
Absolutely.
of smaller is better. Because to me, it's a great topic, because I vouch for that. Small teams are powerful teams.
Absolutely. I think that to a certain degree in the enterprise in particular, it's a bit of a contrarian perspective, because I think what naturally happens in a large scale organization is you have power and resources accumulate, and the process of accumulation often is a brute force method to make progress, whereas small teams require exceptional leaders, require exceptional commitment, require clarity of purpose and mission. They require clarity of vision. All of these things are sometimes hard to do inside of a large-scale organization, especially one that has a legacy and a history. And so what I think naturally happens is you get large monolithic silos that tend to be internally, in many cases, quite combative with each other. And the internal friction actually starts to tear at the very fabric of what made the organization great in the first place. The smaller is better is really designed to speak to the folks in the messy middle of the enterprise, whether they're managers, directors, VPs, SVPs, they sit in the C-suite. Anyone who has a hankering for a better life, a better way of getting work done, of driving innovation, driving high quality outcomes, especially in an organization that might struggle with velocity, that might struggle with quality, and that might even have a culture that might fraying at the edge. The book itself is a very practical guide to what I like to think of as really fundamental principles for how to organize work inside of a large scale organization. But the principles don't really exclusively apply to the enterprise. You can apply them inside of a 100-person organization or even a 10-person organization. They are really truly bottom up principles. The first is and the easiest one to articulate is really about radical transparency and the environment that you create when candor is a part of the internal API drives tremendous upside. It encourages speaking truth to power. It encourages the encourages decision making based on facts, not on supposition or intuition, which is, I think, a natural human inclination. We see the world through our own eyes, and we tend to believe it exists and works the way that we think it does. Facts have a funny way of reshaping those perspectives, but if we're not actually looking at the same set of facts across an organization, whether it's in the internal reality of compensation data or financial performance, or it's the external reality of the feedback that comes directly from surface area with our clients and the market, that shared visibility is fundamentally important for us to improve decision-making quality. And that leads to kind of the second point, which is autonomy at the edge. And that's another core principle of smaller is better. You want decision-making to be done in areas of the organization where there's the highest fidelity of quality data. Every time you are a step removed from the source of truth, your visibility, your understanding of what that data means diminishes. And so in a maybe traditional top-down organization where decisions are made at the center, decision-making becomes less effective over time. And the centralization decision-making disempowers the folks who can actually have the biggest impact. It is, however, it can, however, tend to be chaotic when you push autonomy to the edge. And so Smaller is Better provides practical tools and guidance on how you can make a large-scale organization comfortable with that conceptually. The third piece, the third stool or leg of the stool is about real-time feedback and how critical it is to create a culture and environment in which feedback is seen as an investment in your peers and your colleagues and your leaders, in those who support you on your mission, and it provides the building blocks for how to actually roll out a real-time feedback process, which again is a bit can feel messy. It's a very organic process, and it's often a bit counterintuitive inside of organizations where you rely on systems of scale to drive efficiency. An annual performance review cycle, or even a quarterly process, whether it's top down or it's 360. What I found in my experience with my clients, feedback in those ecosystems often feels punitive because there's a huge time delay between the moment to which the feedback is highest, provides the highest amount of value because it actually is contextually delivered in situ versus what happens when you receive feedback about something that you did 3 or 4 months ago. It starts to feel a bit punitive in a way. And it's also really hard, with the busy lives that we all lead, to actually take and apply that feedback in a practical, precise way. So what you see in kind of traditional enterprise feedback performance review systems is that they become a tool to manage exits from the organization. They're not really designed to improve the organization because they're not designed to improve the individual. So that's the third piece. There's a lot of other elements in the book, tools that help to provide the connective tissue for small teams to succeed. A whole section of the book on how to scale from the system from a single team to many teams horizontally. But fundamentally, it comes down to a way of working, and it's not overly prescriptive. It's philosophical, but also practical at the same time.
Yeah, it's great. Right. I really value what you're saying. That small team transparency, feedback loops, and getting that decision making out to the fringes. I like that language. That autonomy. But it can be a dramatic shift for many organizations, can't it? But organizations out there are looking for agility and greater speed, and it's often the system that's impeding that, of these great big silos where everyone's fighting and not giving feedback, but more.
That's exactly right.
We got a saying in Australia called white anting. It's where people are like destroying your framework and destroying around you without you even knowing it. I think it's and I guess it relates when we talk about then flowing into technology and the future that's coming with artificial intelligence and AI that's with us now, being used all over the place. But Brady, what's your view on why do we also need to consider artificial intelligence right now? What are you seeing?
So we work with organizations that are attempting to make sense of how AI will disrupt their markets, their talent base, the commercial strategy, their scaling patterns. In my opinion, we are on the cusp of what will probably be the most disruptive industrial revolution of the last uh, uh, 500 years, which is a pretty broad period. We're talking about more impactful than the printing press, more impactful than the steam engine, more impactful than electricity, which sounds perhaps hyperbolic, but when you really think about it, we are as a species rate limited by our evolution is rate limited by the capacity of raw intelligence. So today we have roughly around 8 billion human brains on this planet. So that's the sum total of the intellectual capacity that we can point at any single problem. With AI, we have a potentially exponential scalable number of human quality brains. And when you think about it in those terms, pointing an exponential resource like that, or even a semi-exponential resource, focusing it on a problem space can deliver the kind of acceleration that it's really hard for us to fathom. So we are really entering an exponential period of the evolution of our species, of our society, of our civilization, and the fundamental shifts that are going to take place are going to disrupt almost every aspect of human life. It again feels hyperbolic to hear these things, but it's true. We're just on the very beginning of this curve. The compounding effect of the impact of artificial intelligence, in particular AGI, is going to be unbelievably difficult for us to fathom, without even getting into the more speculative thinking around when AI becomes recursively self-improving. And there's been a lot of ink spilled on that front. So if we hedge off from there and just talk about AI as a tool to accelerate human innovation, to increase our efficiency, organizations are going to suddenly, especially large-scale organizations that have a lot of overhead, that have a lot of infrastructure and bureaucracy, that was designed to enable them to operate at scale, are suddenly going to be competing against much smaller organizations that are much more nimble, that have the same capacity to manage overhead and to solve complex challenges, the layer at the organizational layer, at a fraction of the cost. And that is going to put organizations that have invested in scale in a really difficult position, because they're going to have to suddenly either retrain mass amounts of their workforce, or they're going to have to reinvent the very nature of the work that they do.
Yeah, Brady, I totally vouch for that. Even without considering AI, how easy it is to access high performance software and systems at very low costs that outgun probably what massive corporates are using. I vouch from my own business. It's unbelievable. So then you throw AI on top of that, and it's like organizations that don't have small teams and autonomy at the edge and don't have this ability to make what's critical transparent and feedback and all the things you wrote about in your book, Smaller is Better. I feel for them. Like it is a rough journey, a rough journey ahead, because it's like they're going to need rapid transformation, or else they're just going to get destroyed. They already are.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think the reality that they're facing is a difficult one to process, because at scale, organizations they exist to persist, and suddenly I think they're going to have to face a set of challenges that they may never have had to face before. That go to the very core of the existential question of even what is a company. Why do companies exist? Well, they're invented to make the deployment of capital efficient, to return capital to shareholders. If you rewind 300-400 years, the idea of a company didn't really exist. you had individual um, entrepreneurs, essentially small family-owned businesses. There were small collections of individuals who plied a trade. Now that will be possible to do at global scale, which is really hard to fathom, but it is going to flip the bottle upside down.
Yeah, because you could look at things, Brady, on like scale, like with manufacturing and stuff like that, and you could say, oh, those guys have got some sort of protection, but really they don't, because like a boutique brewer, which is happening, he or she can set up, start marketing, gear up all they need to run a really great company really fast, technology wise, have a boutique brewery, make money out of that, and then start scaling rapidly. Like it's
Exactly.
even in a complex system like beer manufacturing, you can actually grow and scale into the largest brewery if you need to quite easily in some ways, because it just enables it.
That's exactly right. Even in traditional industries that have really significant moats like aerospace, that change is coming too. I am an investor in a company called Blue Shift, which is a small propulsion system manufacturer. And what they're able to do with the size and scale of the resources that they have and the team that they have is really shocking.
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
it's
Brady,
truly shocking.
I'm working with similar in Australia, small CNC machining firms that have grown into really rapidly in an agile way, again, in aerospace, which, like you say, typically you'd think have it really difficult. It's exciting, isn't it, mate? Like
It is.
if you're
That's
that big
incredible.
company, you'd be worried. But when it comes down to the excitement of our world for the future and the opportunity is great.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. Change is inevitable, and it's a question of how you adapt. There's plenty of examples of organizations who failed to adapt that ended in the dustbin of history, and ultimately everything comes to an end, right? So any company that you can name has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Even the ones that we love and rely on today to that power the fabric of the digital world that we live in, all those companies will have an expiration point too. The exception is probably a handful of Japanese ryokans who have been around for 700-800 years, but they probably will eventually come to an end too, right? So if you begin with that supposition, then it's a question as a leader in a large scaled organization, where are you on that journey? Are you still
Yeah.
on the rising action? Have you reached the climax? Is it are you in falling action? You don't realize it. When you think about the narrative arc, uh, understanding where you are on that trajectory is really important. Also, the realization that you can change it too, right? And that's what's so great about businesses. They're just collections of people at the end of the day. And without the people, there's no business. So if you want to change the business, you got to change the way people think. You have to change the people in your organization. You have to change the way they work. And if you do those things, you can change the very course of the history of and the future of your company.
Yeah, and it's happened, hasn't it? Like there's case example after case example that's evolved. Brady, the question I'd like to ask you, because I think there's also too a risk that one of these agile startups actually goes down that bureaucratic path and actually, there's a real inertia for people who start up and have agility and speed and pace and are using technology well to actually evolve into one of these siloed, stuck companies. But the question I've got is then, how can organizations, you know, avoid that, particularly with AI and technology? How can they avoid that? I'm going to go into AI as a small company and I'm going to scale and keep my agility, or I'm a big company already and I need to build agility and be able to compete with technology that's coming through and the agility of smaller companies and what they got access to.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal question, Brad. From my worldview, I see there are two um, poles that most organizations have to contend with, and the pendulum will swing back and forth between them as they mature. One is the builders, the creators, the entrepreneurial um, uh, part of their DNA that tends to value autonomy, rapid decision making, but also tends to be hard to replicate. And so, at a certain point in an organization's life cycle of maturity, they will start to bring in or build from the inside out the part of their DNA that is focused on scale and efficiency, and repeatability. What I think happens in many cases as that high speed, high velocity, high performing organization attempts to scale as the pendulum swings, and there isn't anyone watching the swing happening, and the builders, the creators, the entrepreneurs tend to jump off the ride at some point, and all that you have left then is the efficiency people. Those people are super important, incredibly valuable. The other folks are too. What you've got to figure out is how to actually encourage the friction. You need the push and the pull. You need the tension. It's healthy. I think a lot of organizations struggle with the idea that things need to be seamless, but they shouldn't be. The friction is where the growth happens. That's where the creative tension is where you actually make things better, and figure out how to retain both of those groups in the same environment, motivate them, inspire them, encourage them, but force them to grind the gears. That's where all the magic happens. But you have to have both. And I think the organizations that struggle with going from high velocity, high performing to scaled, efficiency oriented bureaucracies, they throw out along the way the value of waste. They throw out the value of that creative destruction that you need to make something new, and you have to recapture it. So for the small agile organization, bring in the efficiencies and the efficiency experts, the scalers, the platformers, but force them to work with the entrepreneurs and the builders and the makers. And if you're all the way over here and you're 100 years into your journey, you're trying to figure out how to recapture the spirit of innovation, you've got to bring in those disruptive forces and put them in charge of things and give them the autonomy to actually break stuff that you didn't think needed to be broken.
Yeah, I can see that, Brady. Like, it's how do you keep that thought of innovation and difference and making things better? I also see, Brady, that a lot of companies, as they scale, you have this small company where people are thinking and improving and innovating at the front line because they are the front line. And then all of a sudden, as we scale, we disempower the front line and we just want them in some ways subconsciously to be a pleb and just do your job. And it's like, how do we stop that culture creeping in where we actually keep the autonomy at the front line and that innovation and thinking? Because I got to admit, Brady, I don't think I've met a frontline employee who doesn't have it in their soul to improve and innovate, or they're not going home and improving and innovating at home. But for some reason,
Totally.
It's like we build these bureaucracies and then we start to have the habit of leave your brain at the gate because I just want you to punch out widgets. And
Totally, super destructive to value, to retention of high performing talent. I think part of it is that failure becomes at a certain point seen as a negative, and in organizations we need to optimize for success, which sounds like, oh, of course we want to optimize for success, but when you do that, you actually optimize for the wrong thing. We need to optimize for is failure. How do you repeatedly and successfully fail? Because failure is the necessary ingredient to success. And so the organizations that optimize for success attempt to take all the risk out because that's how they think they're going to succeed, is let's eliminate the failure. But it's the inverse that's true. You need to optimize for failure at high speed, high volume, but with minimal risk for each discrete failure point. And if you do that fast enough, you can actually succeed. But that is fundamentally a cultural shift at the end of the day. And you're right. I think the natural tendency, the entropy in the system always kind of bends back towards people are innately lazy. I mean, that's just humanity. And I don't mean that to disparage us. It's just an important reality. And so we get comfortable, and the comfort becomes what we optimize for. We want the system to work in a way that doesn't force us to reimagine it continuously. I like to say in my organization, everything is broken and that's okay. And the sooner you admit that, the sooner you acknowledge that, the more that you empower people, because you start to realize, you start to embed in people's brains the idea that the broken state is the state. and we're all responsible for making it better. And you're right. Great people are always going to innovate. They're always going to drive upside, and you can either have them do it for you, or they're going to do it for themselves. And if you create an environment where they actually have the autonomy, they're empowered to innovate for you, they will drive outsized results every single time. And if we create an environment, on the other hand, that discourages failure, that punishes them for taking risks, then they're just not going to do it, and they'll go home and do it on their own time, and they'll end up building the startup that comes back and kicks your butt 5 years later.
Too true. I'm sure that's played out a few times throughout history, and a lot more right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Brady, in this area of expertise where we're talking, because it overlaps so much with your book, doesn't it? Because we're talking about small teams, autonomy, transparency, it's free to fail, but learn from the failure and improve. That's where the innovation comes from. What would be your enterprise excellence 2-minute tip to a leader of, a company that's scaling or one that's big, where it's like, hey mate, this is what I'd say to do to really make sure you navigate the future in the right way to mitigate what's going to come, the level of speed that AI is going to bring and all the other stuff?
Phenomenal question. I think if I were to distill my perspective down into a 2-minute tip, I think fundamentally it comes down to building a culture that celebrates failure. I really think that's what it's all about. Failure is the necessary ingredient. Create an environment where failure is rewarded, where it's celebrated, where it's seen as the necessary step on the journey to success. If you can do that, and you can focus there, and you change the perception around what failure means, and you make it a positive, it will unlock tremendous value, because it affects and impacts everything. In particular, rewarding failure, I think, is so critical. You can take a member of your team, and you can turbocharge their loyalty. You can turbocharge their motivation by taking their failure and welcoming it, and literally promoting someone who's failed, or giving them a bonus because they took a risk. And that is the kind of behavior that you want to engender and encourage.
Yeah. The learning from failure, and without the ability to fail safely, you're not going to learn. So that's a great one, mate. Brady, you're involved in a really innovative space with AI and organizational structure and transformation for agility and innovation. Mate, but what's been a recent insight for you? What's been a recent aha moment you've had?
Good question. I think the last couple of months, I've had the benefit of being in the thick of it with a lot of folks from a lot of different environments and ecosystems. Sometimes you can live in a bit of an echo chamber, and I think what has been probably the most profound for me, most profound learning, has been about the value of true expertise. And I think that's an easy thing to lose sight of in the world, in the high-paced world that we live in today, where there's a lot of breadth but isn't always a lot of depth. And I think as you're building and scaling an organization, you can easily lose sight of the importance of craft. And I had a particular experience about 2 months ago where I was engaged in a solutioning session with someone in our org that had very little experience solving the kind of problem that we had set out to solve, but applying her knowledge base from this other vertical, from this other ecosystem, to this problem set over here, unlocked tremendous upside. I mean, just really shocking. And that kind of cross-functional application of deep expertise is, I think, so important. Too many times you're in a room with folks who dismiss the lack of expertise of someone who isn't an expert in a particular field, or where the beginner's mindset isn't welcomed into the room, and it's really destructive because you're taking and eliminating the power of that cross-functional thinking. So encouraging it, empowering it, so important. And I think intuitively I understood that, but it was such a shocking, like specific experience for me that it really resonated, and it's actually changed a lot of my day-to-day over the last couple of months.
It's too true, isn't it? It's like a bias breaker or something where it just that person's going to not really care what they say, or they're going to say whatever they want. And it can break a lot of bias and create a lot of amazing outcomes. It's so true.
Absolutely.
But often we can be just so stuck and just want to get purely the experts in the room. Oh, there's that saying, isn't it? Let's get the experts in the room and solve this one.
Totally.
And you want them, but you're saying, bring in that anomaly. Yeah.
Totally. And the process of actually, first applying first principles reasoning and really interrogating the problem space. And you really do it much better with less experience than you do with more.
Yeah, it's a bit like the child. You ask why a few more times. It's really cool.
Exactly.
Hey, Brady, I appreciate your time and knowledge, mate, and the book you've written and the knowledge you shared today and helping us create a better future. Mate, but how can people reach out to you if they want to engage, learn more, connect, get help?
Absolutely. Thanks, Brad. Best way, if you're interested in the book, www.smallerbetter.com. And to connect with me, www.brim-deforest.com, all one word. I've got a contact form. My email's on there. You can also catch me on LinkedIn, X. I'm very accessible, so I always enjoy meeting new people and connecting. So if there's something I can do to help you, just say the word.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Brady. Mate, I appreciate your time, appreciate your knowledge, and thanks for helping us create a better future. Cheers for now.
Thanks so much, Brad. Really appreciate being here. It was a pleasure.
Cheers, Brady. Bye for now.
What a great episode. Remember, you can go to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast website to download, under resources, the Agile Scrum at Scale infographic that helps you provide or gain additional information on how this system works, how you can create a large organization or transform a large organization into one that is highly agile and moving, just like a startup in many regards, although on a lot bigger scale. There were two key takeaways for me from this episode. Firstly, small autonomous teams. It's been researched many times throughout the last 100 years, team size and performance and agility. And it keeps coming back to that small team, 5, 6, 5 type people. You start hitting 8, your agility starts to drop. Largely it comes back to communication channels and that reduction in communication as you go to a bigger team and all the impacts that can happen with that. The other key takeaway for me from the episode with Brady was the need for scaling organizations to avoid bureaucracy. So as you grow, sustain that startup style structure using models like Agile Scrum at Scale and the work done by Brady in his book, Smaller is Better. And also it provides a guide for how to transform large organizations into one that has autonomy at the fringes and transparency and the ability to be agile and actually survive the adaptive future that's coming. It's too true that a small organization can start up and get their hands on technology and AI so cheaply and easily that allows them to actually move faster than a larger organization, and in some cases have better technology also. It's something that every organization needs to consider now as they grow, or larger organizations need to consider for how they go into the future to build that agility and be successful for times to come. Thanks again for your time and knowledge. I really appreciate it. Thanks for helping us create a better future. Bye for now.